Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Jakarta Tech Talk. My name is Serena, and joining us today is Buhaki, who will be presenting on the topic of building and hosting an MCP server with Jakarta EE. If you have any questions for Buhaki as we move through today's presentation, please put them in the chat or use the Ask a Questions tab. Without any further delay, Buhaki, over to you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this session today. Without further ado and wasting everybody's time, let's begin. Just a quick introduction. My name is Bohake. For those who don't know how to pronounce it, it's Bohake Cindy. I've been an enterprise Java developer for close to 2 decades, so 19 years. So about February next, I'll be doing about 20 years of Jakarta EE development and architecture. So in those 20 years, I've played around with almost anything Jakarta EE. Well, my first industry experience started at IBM. So that's where my Jakarta EE bug started. Pretty much on top of that, I run a nonprofit called DevOps for Kids South Africa. So I'm trying to get kids into tech and teach them to code from a young age. You'll probably see some of my videos on YouTube about it. And yeah, and I'm a member of a micro-profile and Jakarta EE working group. You'll probably see, if you follow me on LinkedIn, you probably saw me talking about LangChain for JCDI. It's one of the projects that we worked on with LangChain for J to release the CDI compatible version of building AI services using LangChain. So where can you find me? On X, I'm at the Elite Gentleman. Every other social media, you take my first name, put a dot, put my surname. I'm pretty much on almost all social, except Mastodon and Blue Sky. And yeah, you can email me. Gmail works. I'll probably see it. Just give me time for replying because there's too many spam emails there as well. So yeah. So to get started, I know lately we've been into the whole AI bug, and there's been a lot of AI agents, framework, and libraries springing up all over the tech sphere, and Java is also not behind. So the primary component of AI agents requires an LLM. So your LLM will basically take your user prompt and your system prompt, and you can customize it to build your agent to do a specific task. And in order to provide specific tasks, it needs access to external tools and services, and that's where tools features comes in. So in order for the AI agents to extract external data that it does not have within its memory, so that's where MCP also comes in, which we'll focus on it later, and some kind of memory. LLMs and AI agents are all stateless, so if you do not provide memory, it will not have context on the previous conversation. So you would add memory in order to carry on a conversation in order for it to know exactly what context to take and how to understand your entire context and conversation and produce the result that it requires. And tools are not new. Since the dawn of LLMs, there has been tools that were available, but the problem with tools, it were all specific to specific LLMs. So there was no standardization of tool structures on that could integrate with different various LLMs, for example. So and that was challenging. So if you before MCP, if you wanted to use tool features and you use, for example, ChatGPT, you had to learn how they you had to understand the structure of the two formats that they provided in order for the ChatGPT agent to actually retrieve resources using the tools that they, services that they provide. And tools used to run locally. Nowadays, you can just expose an endpoint. It can actually go and do tool execution, but ultimately you had to download on the machine. So if you didn't have a machine that was powerful enough to run your LLMs, there was a problem. So, and you couldn't share your tools to other services as well. So with those challenges, Anthropic introduced the Model Context Protocol, which everybody calls it the USB-C for all AI apps and LLMs, which is basically an open standard for LLMs to consume contextual data from external sources. So it's a unified structured format that, should you implement it properly, all LLMs could actually invoke. And so it's basically an IO request response kind of format. So it knows exactly, okay, I need the specific data. There's a specific tool that it can execute to retrieve that data. It's now received max adoption. There's over 15,000 MCP servers available through various registries. I know Microsoft released on the Azure, they released another MCP registry recently. The other MCP registry that's famous out there is also Docker. So it is widely adopted. Various companies like Google, Microsoft, AWS, and various cloud providers also adopted MCP. If you want to start learning what MCP is about, you can read its official documentation, and they have the official SDK also provided. The Java SDK that's available on MCP it's the exact same SDK that Spring has. So you'll find there's a similarity of that because Spring donated the SDK to MCP. So if you Spring this developer, you'll find some familiarities with it. The architecture. So basically, Spring has what I have the host, client, and server. So the host is basically the one that interfaces with your client. So basically your code desktop, your AI agents that you've written, or your Copilot. That's the host. The client is the one that will have a one-to-one communication with your server. And so your host would actually interface with your MCP server through a client. And MCP uses a JSON RPC standard protocol. So it's not your standard REST microservices or REST services communication. So that's if you want to host it as on a HTTP standard. But then they've provided 3 transport standard IO, which means that your client and your server needs to run on the same device because it basically uses your standard IO process IO to actually do the communication still using the JSON RPC protocol. So your messages will be in JSON format. And for remote hosting services, it supports HTTP server-side events, which actually they've deprecated. And now they support streamable HTTP, which allows you to stream your stream your messages and basically replay your messages and store your messages for later replay, or for later replays basically. Currently, in order to play with the MCP, you need to download the client and the server locally, run it locally, and then get your host to connect to your MCP server. And a couple of features that MCP provide is server sides are resource prompts and tooling. So resources is basically the resource where you can get your data. It can be your database, it can be file format, or whatever. So wherever your data resides, you can export it as a resource that it will actually provide. Prompt is basically you can expose certain prompts that that you think are beneficial for your AI agents to use and execute later. So especially if you build AI workflows. And then tools are basically function coding, in other words. So if you want if your AI agent provides certain input data and you expect certain data back, so data manipulation or data request response, you will use a tool feature. Certain client features are sampling, recitation. There isn't much examples out there on the web to actually figure that out. I know elicitation is a new feature that just recently got introduced by MCP, so I haven't had a run to play with it. So client features, I'm not an expert at it, but yeah. Other tools that MCP provides are logging, so you can actually, if you developer and you would like to log into the messages that pass through between your host and your server, you can log it. You can do progress tracking and also notifications. But the complexities and that you can read it into the documentation. For Cloud Desktop, you'll have to register your MCP servers on the config file. For example, if you want to do the file system, there's a Cloud Desktop config JSON file that you can use, and then inside the MCP service object, you can specify you can register a new server by giving it a name and then specifying commands. What happens is your MCP server will execute the command internally and run the client internally by executing those commands as provided on the config file. And then for developers, if you want to play with MCP and you're building your own MCP server, there's an MCP inspector, which basically is a web-based implementation of an MCP server that's available that you can run. It's locally on your machine, and then it will pop up on your browser, and then all you have to do is click connect, and whatever features that you enable, because you can on your server side, you can specify which features that you want to enable. Once you enable, it will actually pop up on the browser. It's still managed by MCP themselves, and it's totally written in TypeScript. So there is a tool out there to test your MCP server. Currently, as I said earlier, in order for MCP to work, your server and your client has to run locally, and you'll have to configure And then, yeah, in order for your client to communicate to your MCP. So one aspect for developers who are trying to run locally is to Dockerize the image running on an app server, and then run the Docker command to run it locally, and then on the client to actually connect to it. That's if you want to run it using some type of HTTP transport. SSE transport had no security features at all, so you couldn't apply. Even if you did apply, for example, what you call this, some kind of security like OAuth and whatever, there was no HTTP didn't even care about it, as long as the communication existed between the client and server. Bob's your uncle. With streamable HTTP, they require you to implement at least OAuth 2.1, and 2.1 is still in development phase, so it's not yet usually adopted. So I would suggest using OAuth 2.2, 2.0, and to secure your MCP protocol. Another worry is your MCP registries out there stores your binary of your MCP servers. So one security flaw is, can you trust those binaries? And what steps are there to ensure that these binaries are authentic and they don't have any security vulnerabilities or attacks implemented in there? Is there some type of signage to actually say, you know what, this is verified that this server is legit and it's safe for use by organizations? And most existing Java tools like JSON RCP protocols or compliant solutions, so you'll have to implement it yourself, basically. So the solution I went for, I would like to put a preamble. When I started this implementation, I started it before MCP actually had a Java implementation. So at that time, it was TypeScript, and then Kotlin came after that. So there was no Java specific MCP solution yet there. So this thing started a while back. So when I started, I decided that, you know what, we needed a solution that could be deployable on an application server, and the client and server should use the latest features of the JDK if possible. For example, the solution I have uses executive services, and I've decided to use virtual threads by default because why not? Java introduced it, so. But you can also use Jakarta EE managed executive services, which I use on the server side, and it must also be MCP compliant. And when the Java SDK came out, it used Mono and Flux from Project Reactor, and I said, nah, maybe it's not necessary using it. Why not use completable futures instead? Then, you know, I don't have to worry about including third-party libraries, and I can manage if there are issues. It's easier to fix on my side because I use whatever the JDK provide. So I built what I called CDAI MCP, which is basically the implementation of the MCP protocol up to the latest version. So it's JDK. So JDK support from JDK 17, follows the asynchronous calls as specified by the protocol. So everything is fully asynchronous. On the client side, uses virtual thread. On the server side, uses many executor services that injected by that you can inject from Jakarta EE resource. And you can find all of them both on the GitHub repo. Server side also both implement SSE and streamable HTTP. And the reason for that is because Cloud Desktop, for example, even though SSE is deprecated, Cloud Desktop still runs on SSE, does not have support for streamable HTTP. So that's why SSE is still available. The SSE implementation that I've provided are both implemented on using Jakarta REST and Jakarta Servlet, and each one has its available endpoint. For streamable HTTP, the only difference is Jakarta REST does not have the implementation of streamable HTTP, only servlet. I haven't had the time to actually look into it yet because streamable HTTP allows you to do not only server-side event when replaying messages, but if certain clients cannot support SSE, you can return the message as a JSON RPC object back. So I haven't had the time to actually figure out. Well, I'm gonna get into it, but I haven't had the chance to actually enable both of them at the same time. So yeah, for SSE, you will just have to, your SSE endpoints are different between the two. The SSE endpoint for streamable HTTP should supposed to be get/MCP. I need to change that. So these are the two different endpoints. You will have to, the client automatically, once you send connect, will automatically do the negotiation to be registered into the server, so you do not have to worry about how the startup and initialization happens. And the features that we provided, if you want to expose your features on the server side, we've introduced some annotations. So for tools, you will specify the tool annotation with arguments, and all of these annotations are specified on a method. So once you specify the method with the specific feature annotations like tool resource or the resource template, then on startup it will automatically detect your Java beans or services, and then register them into an MCP compatible feature. So a tool will become a tool feature, a resource will become a resource feature, prompt the same. And Elicit is still in development because Elicit does elicitation by asking a question to the client then provide the answer and then sends it back. Whereas all these other resources with its other features will run on the server side. So if you have a tool running on the server, it will run on the server, and then once it gets a result, then it sends a result back to the client. Whereas elicitation, you're waiting for the answer back from the client in order to execute on the server. So, which makes it simple for developers to write a Pojo class or a service and then annotate the method accordingly, and then and the server will automatically register. If you're using LangChain4j, Language4j also now supports streamable HTTP on its latest release. So you can now add streamable HTTP on by specifying as a tool provider, and you can use a streamable HTTP transport, and it will specify the URL, and it will do the communication for you. An example: this is a tool for a simple calculator. I don't know if so. You'll see there's a method. It says operation, but at the top it has a tool annotation with a description. You must remember that MCP, there's a word context. So in order to understand what the tool does and what argument it needs to require, you need to specify a description. So it's a simple English sentence that says what the operation does, and the argument will be what argument that you need to provide. This is an old example. So it's not supposed to be a tool argument, it's supposed to be an argument. I recently made a change because I realized that all these arguments were exactly the same structure, so I renamed it all as argument. So, but ideally, it does the same thing. So an MCP, once it sees this, it knows that, okay, I have a tool that does an operation to do, for example, simple arithmetic, and it knows exactly that there is a function with three possible arguments, and that it knows that if I need to execute, which values I need to specify on which variable if prior to sending it into the server. And then once that's done, on cloud desktop, as I said earlier, it only supports SAC. I've included my MCP server. I've made my argument, and then you see that there's an MCP remote. MCP remote is basically the bridge that allows you to communicate to your server, to your remote server, and then you specify your URL. And then once you restart your cloud desktop, basically, then Bob's your uncle, and it will pick up your server. And then deployment. If you want your organization to download your MCP server to run on their premises, you can Dockerize it and publish it to Docker's MCP catalog. There is a Docker provide a guideline on how to sign your image and upload it into the catalog. But then in most organizations, they preferred running it remotely on their premises or on the cloud provider of choice, which already got security enabled. Well, you can actually take this application, your MCP application, build it as you normally would your microservices, and just deploy as you would normally would your microservices, except that at the back end it just uses JSON RPC protocol for communication. A little demo. So, I hope that the demos will work. So, how do I zoom? Okay, so here's my little demo here. So here's my MCP servlet that I'm running. So I'm running a servlet version of MCP, which only has, if I can show here. Okay, so my servers has, servers has they have these two. Like I said earlier, my streamable HTTP looks at that MCP endpoint. I've got the SCC servlet and a streamable HTTP servlet that basically is running over here. And on the browser side, I have an MCP inspector, which is running on localhost 9080/MCP. If I do a connect, and why is it not running? My session, oh, for some reason, this thing is dead. I'll have to restart it at the moment. Actually, this thing was up and running a few minutes ago. Well, let's see if it can get it running. In the meantime, if anybody has question on the chat and would like to ask any questions, but I can actually show, for example, the weather example. I don't know how to zoom on Eclipse, but you'll see, for example, there's a tool here which basically says to get the real weather. There's a tool that's got a weather and then an argument. So the city, by specifying the city and the country code, it will actually return you an example and a result to say what is the current weather right now. So no, let me not start Claude yet. My server hasn't started at the moment. So I'm running Open Liberty. So you just have to forgive me if it's running a bit slow. But in the meantime,
Just to let you know, Bohaki, there's no questions in the chat. And the
okay.
Zoom configurations will have to be done in your settings if you're wanting to zoom in. It's not something that can be done through Crowdcast.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I need to figure out Zoom on this page.
We actually have a question from Majid. Does it work only on Jakarta 10?
Yes. There was various reasons why. One, we wanted to just everybody get to the latest version of the Jakarta EE. So there was a decision for, because I worked alongside with LangChain for JCDI, and because we decided like we wanted to get everybody into the latest version of Jakarta EE because of all the wonderful features it provided, we decided why not have it in. There we go. So have it Jakarta EE. Oh, nice up. So if I start Claude, and I hope Claude works. Have you ever wondered, like, every demo always works the day before or an hour before, but it dies on the minute? Claude. Why this? So Claude should connect sooner or later. Okay, let's see. What's the weather like? Uh, if I say, well, it hasn't connected yet. No, it hasn't connected yet. Why? Okay, let me see. Mm, reconnect. Am I having a problem? My services is wrong. Why? I haven't changed anything on the code and it still says it's no. Something broke and I do not know why it broke. And I have made no changes before that. Oh my God. Let me see. Before. Wait. Well, it says it's no. I have no idea why it's no. Ah, why? 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 Ah,
Haki, would you like to answer a couple more questions, or did you want to focus on this and see if you could sort this out?
no, no, no. Questions anytime. I
Okay.
don't have a problem with questions.
So Majid followed up question is, we have lots of legacy systems. How can we connect legacy systems to MCP? And I will put that question here on screen for
How to
you.
connect how to connect legacy system to MCP? Wait, you
Yes.
mean on do you mean hosting your own MCP server, or do you mean the client communicating to an MCP server?
Majid, if you're with us, if you can kindly clarify one of the two in the chat, that would be great.
You know what? Let me try SSE, and hopefully SSE will work.
He said host.
Host.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's well. One On legacy system, I wouldn't recommend using it on legacy systems. Because, for example, I don't know which version of servlets you would use. Okay, this is SSE that's running, and you'll see, for example, this. If I list the tools, there's a get weather, for example. So I can say, for example, I still don't get why Claude hasn't connected yet. And normally Claude does connect. So if I see log files, it had communication. For some reason, it didn't connect today. But on here, for example, if I had to say, here are my tool and run this, it gives me my result that the current temperature is 23.8. So Johannesburg weather, yeah. Well, it's 25 degrees, which says, well, I don't know, wind speed says 13 kilometers per hour, which says 11.2, and clear skies, which is correct. So one way, this is an MCP server that is running using SSC protocol. For some reason, streamable HTTP just crashed, and it ran an hour before. But like I said, you can create an MCP server that runs on a Jakarta EE compatible application server. In my case, it's Open Liberty, and you can see here, for example, properties. How do I zoom? I haven't used. So you can see all these session IDs that are the session ID that is connected to, and now I want to see if I've got the log file here. On the server side, I should have a log file somewhere. Log file, log file, log file, log file, log file. There we go. And if I open the log file, and I scroll down, you'll see that the resource scanner picked up my resources, and then there's my session, which is ADE, which is exactly the same. Wait, hold on. Where's my this session here? Should be here somewhere. I don't know which session this is, but anyway, there is a session and it's communicating with my tools over there. And you can see there was a communication a few minutes ago, 3 minutes ago, with a tool call over here. So yeah, that is MCP using Inspector. For some reason, Claude is not running. And don't know why. Like, Claude's supposed to be running. All right. So in conclusion, I've basically showcased that you can run MCP and deploy it as you would a microservice, and at the back end, it basically wraps your microservice, your REST endpoint, and to communicate in a JSON RPC kind of way. And with streamable HTTP now, you could actually apply authorization. Like I said, the specification requires 2.1. 2.1 story development, but anyway, it's getting there. And then all the developers have to do is write, in this case, is a simple POJO class, like I did here. So, like this weather example is just a simple Java class. In future, because I'm study development, it will be CDI managed. So you can probably inject it as well and create business services, and it will still be executed as a tool on your MCP server. So that's it. That's the end of my talk. Yeah, I managed to demo something, at least something that's broken and not broken at the same time. I don't know. They need to disable this. So yeah, but
so we have a question from Lady Calamity. They're asking for your slides. Is that something that can be shared? Are you able to share that?
Oh yes.
Would you like to drop
share my
email?
I can. Let me get back to the chat here. Yeah, the slide will be shared. Usually it's on SlideShare. If you follow me on the socials, like on X and on LinkedIn, just look for my name. So if you find me on X, on LinkedIn, I will put everything on the slides on SlideShare, and you can download it from there. That's where I normally do after the talk. And for Majid's question, yeah, for legacy system or old system, I do not know which version of your servlet basically is running, because it would require you to store your RESTful services, things that supports what you call this SSC, and so for us to be safe, Jakarta EE10 was the safest bet in any way. And we want organization to update. We're on JDK 25. I don't want to hear about people still using Java 8, Java 8. One, like, yo. But anyway, somebody has to start somewhere.
Okay. Perfect. Well, yeah. I want to say thank you in any case for your presentation. And just a last reminder, if anybody in the chat does have any questions, to put them in the Ask a Questions tab or in the chat, and we'll be able to do that. Just a couple of reminders also. OCX 2026, the call for proposals are officially open. So if anybody is interested in the audience to check that out, I will drop the link in the chat there. Go check it out and see if you're interested in hosting a talk at OCX. So they're open as of Monday and will be closing on the 13th of November. And let me just take another quick look at the chat. Nope. And just, yeah, a lot of people are asking for your slides and get repos. So as Buhaki said, everyone, make sure you go follow him on X and or on LinkedIn. And he does have everything that he needs there and we'll be able to connect with you there as well. So that's it.
Yeah. No, perfect. I'll share it within an hour. So you'll have it immediately.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, you're getting lots of thanks here. Thank you so much again. You have yourself a wonderful rest of your day. And we look forward to many more chats.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming. Much appreciated.